said he's investigating the links and the possibility of coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Given that the president just this morning said that the Democrats made up the Russia story, why would the FBI director be investigating a story if it's simply...
I don't think that's what he said, but again, look at what...
No, he did. He said that he's investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether or not there was any coordination.
Correct. But again, investigating it and having proof of it are two different things. You look at the acting Obama CIA director said that there's smoke, but there's no fire. Senator Tom Cotton, not that I'm seen and not that I'm aware of. You look at Director Clapper, not to my knowledge. Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, I have no evidence of collusion. I mean, there's a point at which you continue to search for something that everybody who's been briefed hasn't seen or found. I think it's fine to look into it, but at the end of the day, they're going to come to the same conclusion that everybody else has had. So you can continue to look for something, but continuing to look for something that doesn't exist doesn't matter. There is a discussion, I heard some names floated around before, that were hangers-on on the campaign. And I think at some point, people that, got thrown around at the beginning of this hearing, some of those names, the greatest amount of interaction that they've had is had cease and desist letters sent to them. So,
the Roger Stones and the Carter Pages?
Yeah, exactly. The Carter Pages, yes. But I mean, those people, the greatest amount of interaction that they had with the campaign was the campaign apparently sending them a series of cease and desist letters. So again, I think that when you read a lot of this activity about associates, there is a fine line between people who want to be part of something that they never had an official role in and people who actually played a role in either the campaign or the transition. Julie.
I just have two quick questions on the hearing today. Does the president, now that we know that there is an ongoing investigation by the FBI, does the president stand by his comments that he's not aware of any contacts that his campaign associates had with Russia during the election?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second one is, has anyone from the White House...
Well, can I just amend the first?
Sure.
Obviously, just to be clear, I know that I'm trying to think through this for a second because obviously General Flynn,
right.
But again,
during the campaign,
right,
before the election.
And I'm not aware of any at this time, but even General Flynn was a volunteer of the campaign. And then obviously there's been this discussion of Paul Manafort, who played a very limited role for a very limited amount of time. But beyond, hey, Jonathan, hold on. Can you stop interrupting other people's questions? Hey, Jonathan, somebody's asking a question. It's not your press briefing. Julie's asking a question. Please calm down. Julie.
Are you saying then that the president is aware of contacts that Manafort...
No, nothing that hasn't been previously discussed. I just don't want to make it look like we're not aware of the stuff that's
Understood. And then the second thing, has anyone from the White House up to the president been interviewed by the FBI as part of this investigation?
Not that I'm aware of. Mara.
You said that you made a point of saying that Comey refused to say whether he had briefed Obama about the investigation, and also the president on his official account tweeted the same thing today. Comey made a point today of saying, please do not draw any conclusions from my ability to confirm or deny anything, but you are drawing a conclusion from that.
I think we're pointing it out. I mean, we're making a point that it is not known, and I think there's further. I mean, to everyone who was looking for a conclusion today, I think there's a lot more that needs to be discussed and looked at before we can jump to a conclusion about. Hold on, but I think the point is that in the same token, you've got individuals that want an answer. And at the same time, there's clearly a lot of information that still hasn't come out or been discussed.
So you're looking forward to this investigation?
I think that there is a lot more to come, is the answer that
The reason that I'm asking this question is you said that they are going to come to the same conclusion of everybody else.
My point is that...
So you already know what the conclusion is.
No. What I'm getting at is that there is this media narrative that continues to talk about collusion that exists, and yet every person that's been briefed, Nunes, Tom Cotton, Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, Clapper, the Obama appointee, have all said that nothing that they've seen makes them believe that there was any collusion. And I think there's a difference between talking about an investigation into the 2016 election, which we all know, and any evidence of collusion. There is no evidence, according to the people that have been briefed, of any collusion or activity that leads them to believe that exists. I think that is an important point that gets overlooked over and over and over again.
You said it's fine to look into it, but they are going to come to the same conclusion of everybody else, that this collusion doesn't exist. So you already know.
No, I don't. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that every single person Because what the director said today is that there's an ongoing investigation. My point is to say that everybody who's been briefed on that investigation, there's an assumption that because there's an investigation, it must mean that it's about something. My point to you is that there's an assumption on behalf of most people in the media about what that investigation must mean. And my point to you is that despite the narrative that gets played over and over again with respect to what the investigation might mean in terms of collusion, every person, Republican and Democrat, that's been briefed on it has come to the same conclusion that there is no collusion and that that's over. So while we can talk about an investigation big picture holistically, the idea that so many people are trying to jump to a conclusion seems very, very misguided.
Just hoping you can square the circle a little bit. You said in the case of the president's tweets that there's an ongoing investigation, that more things will come out that may justify that. But in the case of the collusion charge, you listed all the people who said there's no investigation there. Why, in one case, is that sufficient to say that there is no, you can rule out collusion now, versus in the other case you'd say, oh, there's going to be more information coming out that will prove these tweets
because again, I think there's a difference. I'm not ruling anything out. I'm merely explaining to you that every person, Republican, Democrat, Obama, that served in the Obama administration across a broad section.
tweets.
In terms of what?
That there are.
But I think that there's on the investigation itself, we know from the people who have been briefed. On the other piece of it, we know that it's an ongoing thing, and that even according to the Department of Justice, in terms of the information that's been provided, and Chairman Nunes, that they are still at the beginning of this process. That is a very different thing than a group of people saying there is an ongoing investigation, and from what we've been briefed, there is no evidence to suggest any type of conclusion. That's a difference. Hunter.
Sean, what constitutes conclusive evidence for the president on this front when you say there's more to come forward? You've got the FBI director saying nothing to back up the president's tweets about wiretapping former head of the DNI, House Intelligence Committees. I mean, we've had a series of officials. So when does this end for the president? Is it March 28th?
I think, it's not a question of a date. It's a question of where we get answers. You look at someone like Michael Flynn, and you ask the question, how does an American citizen who should be protected by law from having their identity unmasked, how does that happen? Because you got to think about it just like this. The FBI and all of the relevant intelligence agencies have access to this document. They can figure out who it was, right?
Right.
Hold on. So
Who it was?
hold on. In other words, they...
The wiretapping the president. That's the
listen,
claim.
I understand that. What I'm getting at is that there's a lot of information that we have come to learn about what happened in terms of surveillance throughout the 2016 election and the transition. And when you look at somebody like Michael Flynn and you realize that while they might have been looking at somebody else at that time, how does somebody's name that's protected by law from being disclosed get put out in the public? Why was it put out in the public? Because the people in the intelligence community would have had access to that information. They could have found out who it was. But yet, you've got to question, why was a name that should have been protected by law from being put out into the public domain put out there? What were the motives behind that? What else do we need to know? Who was behind that kind of unmasking?
So are you saying the president has evidence that we have
No,
yet
no,
to be
I am saying
seen?
that there's a lot more questions that need to get asked about what was being done in terms of surveillance. Who was being surveilled? Why were they being surveilled? What techniques? Why are certain people being sort of, quote, unmasked and having their identity known? What was going on? But there's a lot more questions than answers that need to get asked.
Who does the president trust to provide those
And I
answers
think we've
if
talked
not
about
the heads of all those agencies?
and we've talked about this ad nauseum, that the House and the Senate Intelligence Committees are looking into this. Today is the first of several hearings that Chairman Nunes intends to call. Senator Burr has already talked about it. There's a ways to go, and I get that you guys want to know the end of the book right now, but we're on the first chapter of this process. Steve.
So Burr and Nunes, he does trust them.
Of course.
To provide those
We've
definitive
put out a
answers.
statement saying so much that we asked them to look into it. So I don't think it should come into any surprise that that's where we have noted multiple times that that's where the president believes the appropriate place in the process and the and for all of these documents to go through. Steve.
Thank you. Are you aware of any White House officials that are under investigation by the FBI?
No.
Okay. And you mentioned the hangers-on in the campaign earlier and Carter Page, but there was also a question about Roger Stone. Was he also in that category? Is he someone that the president is still in frequent contact with? Because he's often called an informal advisor to the president
Right.
and a confidant of him.
Mr. Stone is somebody that the president's known for a long time. He worked briefly on the campaign, I think, till about August of 2015, from recollection. But they have talked from time to time, but I don't think any time recently. But they had a long relationship going back years where they would provide counsel. And again, I played a role early on in his campaign, but ended that role in August of 2015. And I don't know at all when the last time they even spoke was. Sarah.
Incidental figure in this campaign, that he worked for the campaign for 5 months. He was the campaign chairman. He was there for a number of pivotal decisions. So I'm wondering, how is that insignificant, and is the White House aware of any contacts between Paul Manafort and Russian operatives or suspected Russian operatives, and is that a cause for concern?
Well, just so we're clear, I'm not dismissing Paul Manafort as a hanger-on. I was noting some other folks, as Jonathan pointed out. With respect to Paul, though, I believe, and again, I'm not looking to relitigate the election, but I believe Paul was brought on sometime in June, and by the middle of August, he was no longer with the campaign, meaning that for the entire final stretch of the general election, he was not involved. And so to start to look at some individual that was there for a short period of time, or separately individuals who really didn't play any role in the campaign, and to suggest that those are the basis for anything is a bit ridiculous.
So are you saying it wouldn't be cause for concern if we found out that Paul Manafort was in contact with Russian operatives or suspected?
No. I think that, but to intimate,
Chairman?
right? No. But to intimate that somebody was there for 8 weeks and definitely not there in the final 3 months of the campaign, played some kind of lasting role that influenced. You know, again, you realize, I think somewhere between August 12th or the 15th was when he ended his affiliation with the campaign. So my point is to suggest now that if you look at the final 3 months of the campaign, where none of the individuals in question that Democrats brought up over and over again today were affiliated with the campaign, to suggest that somehow shows some high-level collusion is a bit of a stretch, to say the least.
And is the White House aware of any contacts between Paul Manafort and Russian operatives or suspected Russian operatives?
No.
Join in more.
Sean, you've been really critical of reports that are based on sources in the past. Today, it seems like the two headlines that we got out of the committee were, one, an official confirmation directly from the FBI and the Justice Department that there is an ongoing criminal investigation into whether associates of the sitting president had contacts with Russia and Russian operatives, and whether there was any coordination between those. And the second headline being that there is an official, you had questioned in the past, previously a couple weeks ago, when there were reports in our paper and others that the FBI director was indicating that there was no support for the president's tweets. You said, well, those are just reports, those are not coming from his mouth. He hasn't said it. Okay, we've now got it from his mouth directly in open testimony that there's no evidence that he has to support the president's tweets. I guess the question is, you know, do those two facts, which are now on the record and not attributed to anonymous sourcing, does that cause this White House any concern? And how come you treat the latter, the one about wiretapping, you want to say that's just in the early stages, but on the former one, you want to sort of come to the conclusion that the investigation is sort of gotten to the point where you don't have to worry about that because that's all said and done and everybody's come to the conclusion on that. So that seems like you're treating both of those pieces of news very differently.
Well, first, I think your headlines are bad. I'm glad to rewrite. I'd be glad to if you guys are looking for some help. I'm
For a job?
Our services are at the New York Times' disposal if it comes to writing headlines, and we could probably do a couple things on stories too if we're willing to go there. I think because there's a big difference. One is literally talking. There's a big difference. Everyone keeps conflating that there's an investigation into the 2016 election. Got it. No disagreement there, right? But I think that there's a question about collusion between anybody. And my point has been to say over and over again, to the dismay of every one of you guys, is that when the people who have been briefed by the FBI about collusion between individuals, the answer continues to be no. And at some point, take no for an answer. When these people, both sides of the aisle, Obama appointees, elected Democrats, elected Republicans, say no evidence suggested, at some point, it's not just about me, it's about you. Take no for an answer and realize that the people, while you can have an investigation, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to jump to the conclusion that, it must be about the collusion between those two things. They've talked about this for a long time. The 17 intelligence agencies have talked about an ongoing investigation into Russia's involvement in the election. That's vastly different than jumping to the conclusion and saying that there must be somehow, therefore, a collusion between individuals on one side. They don't talk about all of the Hillary Clinton collusion that may or may not have occurred, and that was a subject that came up with a Russian official, and yet that has not gotten pursued once. There were 0 minutes paid on the evening news the other night when that Russian official said that they attempted to reach out to both campaigns. 0 minutes. I know. See, I'm an equal opportunity whack.
Does the president need to take no for an answer in the same way that you're urging?
No,
the
because
news media
one
to
is a bunch of people who've been briefed who are saying we haven't seen anything, and one is an ongoing. And because if you, again, when you ask them, they are getting it. The president was very clear, and I think there's continuing to be a very, very literal interpretation of his tweet, which is whether or not there was wiretapping. The president understands that you don't literally wiretap people the same way that you did in the 70s and 80s with wires and things in the top of phone. So, right.
Director Comey didn't focus
no,
on wiretapping. He
But again, I think that we are still at the beginning phase of a look as to what kind of surveillance occurred and why, and that there's a question about what leaks occurred, why they're happening. And again, just Director Comey's, because I believe one of the big headlines that should come out of today is that when he talks about the unusually high amount of leaks that are coming out of this and classified information leak, that in itself should be a question. Why is so much information being leaked out now? What are the motives behind it? Who is doing it? And is it threatening our national security? Which I do believe the answer is yes. But there is a lot of other stories. And that's why I think, with all due respect to your two headlines coming out, I do believe there's a lot of headlines coming out. It's just that the only headlines that people want to write are the ones that support a narrative against this administration, and not one that actually looks into, how many times do people say that there was no evidence of something happening? How many times, or how much classified information is being leaked? There's a lot of headlines that should be written today about a lot of the stuff that's ongoing. And I know that we have an ongoing hearing, but there's a lot of other things that need to get discussed and aren't being happening. Why did the DNC not let the FBI look at their servers? Why has that story not getting in? Because I would assume that if somebody was victim of something, which they've yelled from the rooftops. Hold on.
I'm sorry. I'm curious. The implication of that is
No.
what?
The question is, why is none of that being looked at?
Question, but
I don't know what but my point is that not to draw an implication, but to merely ask a question. Which all I'm getting at is that suddenly none of the questions regarding any of this seem to get asked or answered or explored, and yet
You won.
Hold on, here, Brian. You get the same treatment that Jonathan does. That doesn't mean you get to jump in. So the answer that I'm getting at is why are none of those questions being asked? Why is no one taking no for an answer when it comes to all of these individuals saying that they've seen nothing? But there are a series of headlines that I would suggest need to get written, and frankly, stories. I'm glad to do that, as I offered.